What do you get when you get two OT podcasters on a Zoom call together? Let's check it out.
Welcome to the Seniors Flourish podcast, where it's all about helping occupational therapy practitioners disrupt the norm by throwing away the rainbow arc and being the best you can be when working with older adults.
Welcome, everyone, to the Seniors Flourish podcast. My name is Mandy Chamberlain. I'm an occupational therapist, and I like to talk about everything having to do with occupational therapy, professional issues, working with older adults. And today, that is exactly what we're going to be doing. We're going to be chatting about OT advocacy, marketing for the profession, OT's distinct value, and kind of whatever else we kind of come up with along the way. And so my guest is fellow podcaster Brock Cook, occupational therapy chit chatter podcaster extraordinaire. Hey, Brock.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm glad we finally get to talk on my podcast.
Definitely. I've never been called a chit chatter extraordinaire, but I think I might put that on my business card or something.
You can use it. I've been giving people titles lately in the last couple podcasts. It's like you have this like word association with people. You know, like you are a chit chatter. You're chit chatter.
That's what I do. I just like to talk.
That's why we do podcasting.
It's true. It's like
isn't that
escape.
true? Well, if some of you are new to Brock, he is a podcast host at Occupied. So let's just talk a little bit about Occupied, and then I want to hear about like how you got into OT and kind of your journey in that.
Cool. So yeah, Occupied started as just a bit of a creative project, I guess. I didn't have any expectations for it other than I'm a bit of a nerd, so I kind of wanted to learn about audio and audio editing and that kind of thing. And I am an OT, and I've always been really passionate about OT, so I kind of combined the two and went, I can start a podcast with this skill set. So it kind of just started as a bit of fun, and it's still fun, but yeah, it's going quite well. I'm enjoying myself very muchly. I get to talk to amazing people like yourself, who's been on it before, and I get to I don't know, fulfill my need to chit chat, I guess. So.
See, hence the chit chat nickname.
It fits. I like it. I'm going to claim it.
You totally can. I mean, that's kind of like part of the fun of podcasting, that we get to, chit chat with each other and learn about the profession and learn about each other's experiences and share our passions. But so how did you end up even finding OT or getting into it?
How long have you got?
Okay, short and condensed version, go.
Okay, short and condensed version. I originally went to university studying engineering. I found out that engineering was actually a lot of math, which I heavily disliked. So was looking for an alternative. I was living on campus at the time. I don't know what you guys call them. We call them colleges, but you guys would call them dorms or something.
Yeah, dorms.
On campus accommodation.
Yes.
And I was walking past my mate's room at at that point in time, and he was in his room, heavily under the influence, playing a guitar and playing with a sock puppet that he had made in class. The sock puppet was some kind of monster thing that he'd come up with. It was called Monkey Broccoli. I remember this vividly.
It has a name?
It has a name. It actually turned into a bit of a college celebrity, that sock puppet.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was quite strange because after that, I can't even remember why. He was a big personality, so maybe that was why. But there was pictures and like you'd get photos with the sock puppet. Yeah, it was a strange time.
But that inspired you?
But not necessarily that, but the fact that he'd made that in class and he was studying OT.
Okay.
So it started a conversation, and then I started doing some research into it, and I went, that actually sounds pretty interesting and sounds like something I could sink my teeth into. So yeah, changed out of engineering and into OT, which was a big change.
I bet.
And here we are. Now is now.
So then what did you like what is your experience in then after you finished uni?
So after I graduated, I went into mental health, which
Okay.
is a passion that I picked up through my placements.
Mm.
And I've worked in mental health my whole career up until recently when I've moved into academia. But yeah, I've worked in all different kinds of mental health, but always in mental health for a decade or so.
Yeah. So how was the transition to becoming like a professor? Is that what I mean, or working in academia, I guess you should say, right?
It's just a lecturer. That's what we call it.
Okay, lecture. How was
Even
that
even
transition?
it was it was different, but it was
Yeah.
more like it wasn't bad. It was just the expectations, the even the way we think,
Yeah.
compared to clinical was just something to get used to. I think I've always been kind of an academic thinker, even
Mhm.
when I was working clinically. So that side of it was okay. And I'm obviously, like you said, I like to chit chat, and I'd done a lot of guest lectures, and I did some casual tutoring of some of the workshop groups and that kind of thing before I took the job. So I was kind of familiar with the teaching aspect of it. And yeah, it took I'd probably say I'm still getting used to it in a lot of ways, but that's
Yeah.
more. I think the biggest difference for me is just operationally how, like, because I was working for the state health service, so working for the government,
Mhm.
and just how, like, from an operational point of view, how they operate is probably the main thing I'm getting used to. But it took a little while to adjust, but it's not too bad.
Yeah. Well, it's like those things that I don't know, maybe from your experience, but from my experience, it's like, you're in school and you're like entrenched in like all the research and things like that. And then you kind of start working. And unless you're that personality that kind of like likes to kind of dig into it, which I kind of do, like I kind of nerd out on that, on that kind of stuff. But then I bet it's a big transition going back to academia because you're kind of right back into it again, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah, and I think I actually really enjoy that side of it, and that was
Yeah.
something when I was working clinically, like, I was almost, like, desperately trying to hang on to that side of it. That's why
Yeah.
a lot of the projects that I did throughout my career, like, I call them extracurricular projects, so stuff that I did outside of work but still OT
Yeah.
related, were aimed at, trying to stay in contact with that evidence base and trying to,
Hmm.
network and stay in contact with other therapists that are, something you just kinda take for granted when you're a student. Uh but yeah, it's been good getting back into that. I think probably the biggest change or the biggest adjustment was just how structured everything is. So even
Mm.
with terms of workload and stress, like, I can map out at the start of the year now, like, when
Oh,
my stressful periods are going to be, because I know when marking is going to happen, and I know when exams are, and I know when the semester starts, and all this sort of stuff. Whereas I guess when you're working clinically, that kind of emotional and stress load is kind of unpredictable. Like, some days are going to be good, some days are going to be bad, but you're not going to know until you're sort of there.
right.
So in a way, that's kind of good because it means I can prepare, ahead of the time for those periods. But I think that's probably the biggest difference between working clinically and working in academia, is just being able to actually plan. And the plan, I know some people are going to throw off, but the plan doesn't change that drastically compared to clinically. So
Right.
once it's mapped out, it's pretty close. It's going to play out pretty close to how it's mapped out originally.
Totally. Do you think how do you think your clinical experience impacts the way that you are teaching or promoting the profession through academia?
Oh, good question. Um, I I think for one, I think when I first started there, I was the only person on staff with mental health experience, so that kind of
Oh, yeah.
worked in my favor because I had a lot more input into the mental health content.
Mhm.
Um, We've since got someone else, which is awesome. So I've got someone to bounce ideas off.
Good, yeah.
But I think probably this plays back into the chit chat thing again. I think communication wise, I have always found, and I'm not saying that OTs that work in physical aren't any good at this, but I think to work in mental health, you have to be really good at communication because we don't have
Mhm.
anything else. Like that's our main assessment outcome treatment tool is our ability to communicate. Like that's it. Because a lot of the
Mhm.
things like we can't go in and yeah, we can observe, someone's house and if it is it messy and that kind of thing, but their symptoms, their experience of it, like we can't just observe that. There's no assessment just to go in and look at that. So we need to be able to communicate. Otherwise, we've got nothing really. If we can't talk to
Mhm.
people, then we don't have much else to sort of fall back on. So I do find that, especially like interviewing and that kind of stuff, I find that a lot. Well, I'm a lot more comfortable with it, probably because I think I've done a lot more of it, just based on
Mm.
where I've worked. So, and I think that communication, being able to dynamically adjust communication styles and skills, really helps in a classroom as well. So that's probably one thing I think is definitely a benefit from my clinical skill compared to like someone else's maybe.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, just actually you actually probably use, like, therapeutic use of self in the in the classroom just as much or in just a different way, you know what I mean? Like, it's
I
kind of
think, yeah, I think
interesting.
you do. I probably don't think about it. Well, I don't consciously
Well,
do it, but I think it does
right.
kind of happen because that's just it's kind of embedded into me now. So it's just something that I
Well, I
do.
yeah, and I think that, it's like having that experience, like, you don't sit and think about you just do it naturally. You know what I mean? And being able to kinda
Yeah,
just, like, read people a little bit better and kind of adjust to what their needs are and, like, looking at body language and, like, all that stuff that kinda goes into that. Um,
yeah, and that's
gosh.
that's something that I'm able to or have been able to sort of even demonstrate for some of the students is like I can have a conversation with you and I can pull all of this information, but also I get more information from watching how you react and your tone and like the
Mhm.
finer I think the finer points of communication as opposed to
Mhm.
just the raw data that you get from talking to someone.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that because there's some communication stuff in one of the subjects I was teaching for the first years. I should say we're an undergrad OT course, so it's a 4-year course.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's an undergrad entry, or it's now, or we've just gone to a mandatory honors entry in
Okay.
Australia. So you don't need a master's or a doctorate to be registered. So you can still
Mhm.
get registered with a bachelor's in Australia.
Okay. Mhm.
Just so no one's confused.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Guess we should've said Brock is from Australia.
If you can't tell by my
Yeah.
amazingly weird, boring accent, but yeah, I'm from the land down under. And we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
we don't put shrimps on the barbie and kangaroos,
You
well, they are
you
kind of everywhere,
don't?
but no, we don't even call them shrimps. They're not even
You
called
say
shrimps.
prawns?
They're prawns,
Do you call
yeah,
them? Yeah, you do call them prawns, okay.
yeah. But this yeah, that's there's a few
Oh,
things, like, stereotypically Australian things that
totally.
just bug everyone, and that's one of them. And I'm like, "We don't even call them
Oh.
prawns." We do eat a lot of prawns. We
What?
don't even call them shrimps.
Yeah, we do. Shrimps with an S.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's kinda shift gears talking about, communication and things like that.
Mhm.
How how do you think you use, like, your communication skills to advocate for our profession? Like, is that a thing? Like, over here, we are always feeling like we're struggling with trying to, like, make OT, quote, "known" or, like, have people understand what we do or, like, what does that look like? Because I think it looks a little different in other places, but what's it like over down down under?
Down under.
Yeah.
Well, when we're not wrestling crocodiles, we like to,
Ah,
no.
fine.
Oh, you're tapping into one of my soapboxes now.
You know what? I like a good soapbox sometimes. Go.
All right, under an hour. Let's go. Um, I think in principle, it's probably very similar in that
Yeah.
uh, we still want the profession to be understood. I think the profession is known. I think it's just not understood. I do think that's our fault. I think we are, as a profession as a whole, like worldwide, I think we are terrible at marketing.
Mhm.
I don't think we're a very assertive profession, and I don't think part of that is I don't think we understand ourselves well enough to be able to articulate it to other people. Um,
Mm.
Most people have an elevator speech or some sort of little spiel that they give, which is fine. But I think the downfall of that is rote learning something like that. You don't get an understanding of it. Like I can rote learn like the recipe for choc chip cookies. That doesn't mean I know how to make them. Um,
Right.
Being able to spill it at a moment's notice, and a lot of that is because if someone asks you what is OT, most people like cringe and get nervous. And I'm like, why? If you're cringing and getting nervous, to me that just says you don't understand it well enough to be able to explain it.
Mhm.
One of the things, and it goes right back to remember when I was at university. One of the things that I got told by, I think it was a lecturer, was like, if you can teach it, you can understand it. Like you have a better understanding of it. So whenever I was trying to learn something, my, I guess, yardstick for how well I understand it is, can I explain this to someone else? Can I teach someone else what this means or how this works? So if I can't explain what OT is, and to start with, I think when people are trying to develop the skill, it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be concise and simple. You just need to be able to explain it. So, if your explanation when you first start out takes 20 minutes, that's fine. As long as you get it out,
Mhm.
that's fine. And
Right.
then once you get that, then you can work on, because that's another step in learning, is then being able to adjust that explanation to the audience. That's a different step. And I think people try and skip that step and just go straight to, I need something that's one line and I can spit to anyone who asks.
Mhm.
Uh, but I think we need to get our understanding of what the profession is, and as a whole, which is another soapbox of mine, because I think a lot of people, when they go to explain what the profession is, they end up using practice examples instead of what the profession actually is. So it'll be like, oh, you're an OT. What is it? Oh, I help older people, and I give them grab rails and mobility
Right.
equipment. And then the next time they see an OT, it might be with their kid who has autism, and they're like,
Right.
"Oh, so you're going to give my kid grab rails in a
Yeah.
wheelchair?" Or, "Oh, no, no, we do handwriting assessments and play engagement assessments." And that I'm like, "Oh, okay." So then the person themselves is left with this like massive disparity, because they don't you put those two bits of knowledge together and you have no idea what the profession does. You have examples of what two people do in their practice areas, but you have no idea what the profession itself does. So I think we need to
Mhm.
get better at actually explaining what the profession does. And you can, excuse me, then people will work out the practice stuff. That's easy. They'll see that. But I think we need
Mhm.
to get better at educating people, everyone, even ourselves, about what the profession itself actually does.
Good insight. No, I completely agree. Why do you think we're not assertive, and why do you feel like we struggle with that? I mean, because we all know what it is, right? Right? Like we know what
I
it
hope
is.
so.
Is it just right? I hope so too. But like,
Yeah.
why is it so hard to articulate?
Um,
Any thoughts?
I think. I mean,
Is it because it's so
there's
broad, or is it
no. I don't think it's that. I think if anything, we've tried to narrow it too much, and stopped explaining it as being really broad because we're afraid that no one understands it. So, like
Mm,
one of the really basic concepts that I use when I'm trying to explain it is that when we talk about occupation, we're talking about like what occupies your time. We're not talking about your job or anything like that. Like, so, and when you explain that concept to people, most people get it. So you're an occupational
Mm-hmm.
therapist. You work with people and like what they do, and then you can use your practice examples after they get that concept if you want. So you're like, what occupies a kid's time? Play. So people that work with kids work a lot with play. What occupies,
Mm-hmm.
teenagers' time? A lot of it's school and sport and that sort of stuff. So if you're working with that age group, you tend to work a lot with those kinds of activities. Like once they get that concept, the fact that, and the other issue I have
Mm-hmm.
is OTs
I'm
who
ready.
who you'll use the excuse that, oh, no one understands that we use the word differently. If you look up the definition of occupation, that's
Mm-hmm.
one of like before like job, usually it's
Yeah.
a definition about occupying a country, which we do not do.
Uh,
And then it's a definition about being occupied. Like that definition usually comes before employment. Like it's actually in the dictionary. And for some
mm,
reason, we've actually forgotten that it can have that meaning, and we now just believe it's just about employment, or that
mm-hmm.
the public believe that it's just about employment, and we now just sit back and use that as an excuse. And we're like, well, it's our fault. We're using a word wrong. And that's why no one understands us. And there's nothing I can do about that, when it's not true. And that's why people understand it when you explain it well, is because the word actually does mean what we need it to mean. We're just not very
Mm-hmm.
good at explaining it. As for why I think we're not a very assertive profession,
I agree. I
there's
don't think we're a very assertive profession,
no.
but I just wanted to see what your
I think
insight was on that.
it's a lot to do with, I guess, the personality traits that are attracted to the profession. Like, and I'm not saying they're bad; they're just not assertive. I think we attract a lot of people that are very caring and very nurturing. We tend to attract a lot of people that want to make a difference in people's lives. We
Mhm.
tend to
Agree.
um, attract people that kind of think a bit differently to medical. You only got to look at online profiles and see, like, there's a lot of OTs that are into, I guess, alternative therapies like yoga and
Mm,
meditation,
mhm,
and all what traditionally would have been thought of as alternative. Anyway, it's becoming kind of mainstream now, but
mm.
um, we're a
Integrative.
profession we're a profession that is willing to adopt and to look at those kinds of things as part of therapy. But I think all of those personality traits, none of them are particularly assertive, and I think that's partly because of the models that we're taught, which is fine. Like, we're taught
Mhm,
about client-centered practice and occupation-based practice and that kind of stuff, which is very much teamwork kind of, I guess, framework that we work from, which works really well for how we practice, but that doesn't, like, that whole collaboration and teamwork and it doesn't work as well for marketing, which is a
mhm,
completely different beast. So in a
mhm.
way, we either have to get taught both skill sets, one for marketing and one for practice, or I don't know, get someone in to help us market. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's it's a tricky question. It's been going on for years. I don't know. I don't
It's been
have
going
the
on.
answer, but I do think there's some quite deep, almost, I guess, systemic reasons why we struggle with it.
Yeah.
Like, it's too much of a coincidence that the whole, whatever, 450,000 OTs around the world seem to struggle with being able to actually market ourselves.
Yeah. And what do you think, when you talk about marketing, like, who do you think that target audience is? I mean, do you think that within, like, the healthcare system, we need to be marketing versus or in addition to the public and your clients? Or what do you think would make the most.
Um, well, I think if you, because marketing's something that I've always been kind of interested in.
Mm,
I think that, like, in traditional marketing, what you're trying to do is increase your market share. So you're trying to get customers in who weren't traditionally there. I don't think we
mhm,
need to do that. Like, our customers are here. Like, our people come to us You know, there's not too many OTs that are running out of, you know, people to work with. And the profession's expanding, it's growing. It's been on the, you know, top 10 profession list for however many years now. So I don't think that's the point of what we want from marketing of the profession. I think what we're looking more is, I guess, clarifying what we offer. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we need to, like, you know, put billboards up and, you know, all that sort of stuff. I think we just need to start small, and the conversations that we have with people that are actually interested, like, you know, that ask you what OT is, or you know, that we are working with, that we can clarify, well, this is what an OT does, this is the services that we offer. But I think if we have some kind of consistent language around that, it kind of builds momentum, because people are going to come in contact with an OT. And if they're coming in contact with an OT, there's a good chance they're going to see more than one throughout their life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think those people, it's kind of like viral marketing in a way. Like, if we can get one person that we come in contact with to understand what the profession is from a, I guess, a core standpoint, then, you know, if someone, you know, they're talking to them, oh yeah, my kid went and saw an OT. Oh, what's an OT? They're going to be able to explain it to someone else. Like, we don't have to do all the legwork. We just have to get the
Mm-hmm.
ball started with really good quality information. Um, and I
Right.
think that's the challenge. So I don't think we have to sort of go out of our way to, you know, I see a lot of people like, oh, campaigning to put more OTs on TV. And I'm like, there's been OTs on TV shows. Nobody cares. Like, the TV, like, you see, there was something on recently, I can't remember, it was some, obviously a hospital show. And they're like, oh my
uh,
God, there's an OT on there. But the OT on that show doesn't stop and go, listen, kids, this is what an OT does. They're just like, oh, I'm an OT. And then they keep going. Like, nobody
right.
cares, really. That's not doing us any favors. It's something that will naturally happen, I think. I think it's a more of a consequence of the profile of the profession increasing, but that's not, it's more of the effect rather than the cause. So
Hmm.
I think what we need to be doing is just having or adjusting those little conversations that we have day to day.
Yeah. Well, and you know, you're talking about like, putting out there like what occupational even means. And I think that's an important thing to kind of note because that really easily justifies and explains. And then like you said, you can put into context what your practice setting is in. But like then that justifies why we're working with older adults, why we're working with pediatrics, why we're working in mental health. Like people are like, how do OTs work in mental health and in, a stroke rehab unit? And you're like, well, it makes complete sense if you understand like what the basic sense of what occupation means, you know? And so I don't
100%.
know. It's yeah, and it's super interesting talking about like having that, correct language to have those conversations. Um and I think it kind of ties in with like OT's distinct value in having an understanding of what we do and how we are differentiate from other professions because to other people and to other healthcare providers sometimes we look like we do what a physical therapist physiotherapist does or what a speech language pathologist does or they're like it looks like you're doing the same thing. So how does that play into it?
Oh, you've just lit this soapbox on
Do I have another?
fire.
Did I light another
Oh.
one? Go.
um, another pet peeve of my own.
No pet
We
peeve. More a discussion point.
Oh no, this one's a pet peeve. No.
No, it's totally a pet peeve. Okay, fine. Pet peeve. Go.
uh OTs, and it's been written in the literature. I think Tracy Fortune wrote about it like 20 years ago about OTs falling into this gap filler role, in which we tend to pick up little bits and pieces from all different professions because they discard them or they're not doing them or we don't feel like they're doing them well. And throughout that process, and that's like an evolutionary process. That's not something that just happened overnight. That's something that we've just been sort of picking up bits and pieces. Like we pick up a little bit from psych, we pick up a little bit from social work,
Mhm.
we pick up a little bit from physio, and it kind of muddies the boundaries about one where our profession starts and theirs ends. So from an outsider's perspective, it does make it look really confusing. And I think
Mhm.
for a long while there, and especially in my experience, a long while, it even muddied that within the healthcare system. Like I would have, nurses come up to me on the mental health ward and go like, "Is this your job or is this the social workers?
Oh,
Like, who should I
yeah.
be
I
referring to this to?" And
think that's settings across the board.
yeah, yeah. And from the people I've spoken to, there are lots of people I've spoken to in all different areas that have had very similar experiences. But I think again that comes down to our marketing, but that side of it's within. I think in that instance, that's more a lead by example kind of thing, where I think where we got to that point because we're not confident or not overly clear in what we actually offer as a profession.
Mhm.
And our core value is occupation. The one thing that separates us from other professions is occupation. If we're looking at that, and I don't even know where to start. This is triggering so many things. um, I'll start with the word function. And I know this is
Okay.
probably going to annoy people, but I hate the word function, especially,
Mhm.
well, with regards to occupational therapy. I know it's used massively, and I know it's used quite extensively, especially in the States at the moment. But
Mhm.
function is a concept or a word that comes from mathematics. The whole concept of a function is it's a set of rules or ideals where you put some information in at one end and you're going to get the same information out at the end. That's how math works. Now for a profession like physiotherapy, function works
Mhm.
perfectly because if this muscle isn't working or if I stimulate this muscle, this is the exact reaction that should happen. So you can
Mhm.
put the same information in at one end and you're going to get the same information at the other. The issue I have is that people tend to try and use the word function interchangeably with occupation, and they are completely different concepts. We work with people, and we do work a lot more holistically with people. If you put the same information in at one end of the person, you're going to end up with different information that comes out the other end. I can do the same
Mhm.
intervention with 35 people and come out with 35 different outcomes because
Mhm.
people aren't functions. People don't work that way. People are a lot more dynamic, they're unique. And I think by discussing things with regards to function of that person, we're really almost limiting them just before we even start working with them. So I think for one, just our mindset around using occupation, I think we need to be very clear on this is what I'm doing. I'm not doing I stopped doing functional assessments, 8, 9 years ago, like 2 or 3 years into practice because they didn't serve a purpose.
Mhm.
I started doing occupational assessments with people because that's our distinct value. That's what sets us apart. Where was I going?
Mm. Mhm.
So that's one thing that bugs me, and I think that's part of where, like, some therapists will use function, some therapists will use occupation. I think that common ground is one of the issues we have with regards to marketing ourselves. But I think that
And
aspect comes from a lack of confidence or a lack of understanding about our core value, which is
well, I think
occupation.
that's oh, sorry. I got really
You're
excited.
no, no.
No, I think I actually don't think people would maybe argue that point. I actually honestly don't think I actually thought about it that way. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
More about than a disagreement of using the word function. But you're completely right. I mean, we like to be a holistic profession, right? Or a dynamic profession. And
Mhm.
we're looking at everything from the physical aspects to the social emotional aspects to the context, the environment. Like we're looking at people and looking at the occupations that they need to participate in from such a big perspective. It is so individualized.
Yep.
But I can honestly say I'm not sure if I ever thought of it that way. So that's a really good food for thought, and I need to process that a little bit. I'm kind of a processor,
Yeah, no, that's fine.
so I'm
See, I process
yeah.
things while I'm talking, So
Oh, so
that's probably
you're a
why I
verbal
talk a lot.
processor?
Yeah, yep.
Oh, that's a good one. You ask my husband, I'm a definitely am like, "Let me get back to you on that." I don't know if that's the best quality, but, yeah,
No, it
okay.
works.
I like that, though. I think I think you're exactly right, because also if you look at, like, at least here in this, in the States, you have, physical therapists. So we have, insurance systems and things like that. And
Mhm.
they are pushing in general to have, functional goals, functional outcomes. Um, so PTs will sometimes write goals with their end game being dressing, as a very basic example, right?
Yeah,
They're not working on the dressing, they're working on specifically the
the functions involved in
components, yeah,
dressing.
the function, yes. But what I think, where people start getting like mad over like turf lines and things like that, because then you start having, well, where do physical therapists, like, can they perform, activities of daily living, and what is that stepping on our toes? And but part of it is strictly, regulated by the payers, because that's what they want, like their
Mm,
ultimate goal, right, for everyone is, um are they, functioning better in, their world. And that's where PT, so it starts getting this kind of this overlap a little bit because of the goals, but not of the way, um, not the process necessarily to get there. If
yeah,
we're doing
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and so it's kind of a crazy thing trying to, identify and explain what our distinct value is. But I think it comes down to knowing the language. I'm saying, like, what is occupation and what is occupational therapy? And I think, you had a really good point about saying, like, if we can like start with that as the prime, explanation of what we do, and then
Mm,
give some examples or whatever you do to try to give it some more context for people.
yeah. Like,
But,
in this setting, this is how that looks.
yeah, yeah, because it's gonna look a little bit different. But I usually, say, like, it's occupational means, the things that we do to occupy our time. And then I'm like, so it's the everyday things, and it can be different for everyone. And that's kind of, I say, my elevator pitch essentially. But then I give, an example, and it looks very different. But
Yeah.
I think having an understanding our distinct value, I think it's really funny, a funny kind of concept, that we all have this understanding of what it is, and like it's so hard for us to verbalize and make it known. Because I mean, how many physicians have you worked with? Maybe maybe you haven't, but I've worked with so many physicians, and they have no idea what we do. And part of it is, I actually, I remember, I can think of one example, him having this physician ask me, and working in the hospital acute care setting and getting ready for discharge, and me having an opinion on, they weren't able to perform something based upon, cognition. And I remember him actually saying something to the fact, and saying, like, well, how do you even know, like, yeah, obviously having no idea what our role is. And I remember, you know, getting a little on my high horse and being like, okay, well, this is what we do. And he actually didn't really care. Let's be honest. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? He just wanted to make sure that they were discharged, because that's what we need to do. But, there's a level of having those conversations and, educating, I think, coworkers, because I think when your coworkers understand what you do, I think that there can be a greater sense of mutual respect between disciplines in general. I mean, because, like, a lot of times, from the outside, maybe people think a nurse just passes out medications all day, right?
mm,
And from a
yeah,
nursing standpoint, they're doing a lot, and they're doing something very, like, important and needed for the client. And same with us, people like, oh, they just like help them brush their teeth or something, right? And you're just like, oh my gosh, that is not what we do at all.
no,
And it is having those conversations and educating. And um but yeah, you're right. It's the whole, like, oh, do you can you see this person for this? I
yeah.
mean, how many times have
That's
we all heard that? You know,
1,000 every day,
a,
every
thou-
day.
1,000.
But I think one
So,
of the things with regards to like advocating within the hospital, or like within your co-workers and that sort of stuff, is something that I used to call ninja advocacy. in that you
A
don't
ninja.
yeah, you don't have to
Yeah.
overtly go out and like start plastering posters or having, like Mormon sort of thing. Like, do you have a moment to talk about occupational therapy? Um, One of the easiest things that anyone can do is start using our language, and people pick up
Mm,
on it. Like, I remember I had a project at a hospital that I was working at where like the project was to make the role more occupation based, bring it back towards occupational therapy, because before I'd got
yeah.
into it, it kind of evolved away from the profession a bit.
Hmm.
And one of the very first steps, and this is well outlined in the literature, is using our occupational language. So I instigated, like, for me, just to start using the word occupation and using it in context within like our ward rounds or when I was talking to doctors. And like it got to the point where the doctors that are like the psychiatrists that I was working with would be able to use the word occupation, but use it well
Mm,
in context and correctly. And I just thought that was the bee's knees, because I'm like, here's a profession that, like you said, like normally would take very little notice of trying to understand everyone else because they're top of the food chain when it comes to health.
yeah.
But they're understanding a concept. I have not explained it. I have simply started using it, and
Hmm.
they are now using a concept that a lot of OTs I've heard say, "Oh, it's too difficult to explain. People don't understand it." I'm like, they're using it correctly, and I haven't overtly gone, "This is what occupation is. This is what I do." I've just started using it in the context of clients' care, and they get it. So
Mm,
I
hmm.
think
Yeah.
rolling out and actually don't be afraid of our language. That's the easiest way you can market the profession, market yourself, and market what you do, is to actually use our language. And I know there's a lot of people, because I've spoken to them and they've spoken to me, that say that it's too complicated, people don't understand it. But I think the evidence in the literature and in my experience is contrary to that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, because I think what we do, and I know I've done this in the past, is you kind of like not underestimate or downplay the profession, I'd say, but like not by not using the language or by not kind of explaining what we're doing, why we're doing it, like it's kind of not fair to the profession as a whole. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
like it's just kind of just saying like how are we different than like a nurse's aide? I mean,
Hmm.
like how is that how do we even look different from someone from the outside? And it's showing that distinct value because we have obviously I think we have so much to offer and play such an important role in the health of people, but like how like we need to start at the bottom, and I agree with that. I think using the language is a huge thing, because once you start talking about your profession in the way that it plays out in your own mind, people have a different view of it
Hmm.
because they don't really know. I can think of an example like working in, let's say, a skilled nursing facility. I had a physical therapist, and we had a she was the director and awesome to work with. I mean, like she was a great coworker. Like it was great. But I remember one time her saying like she's saying that you have a patient that's dementia and they're like, "Well, can't don't you just give people something to do? Like can you just give them something to do?" I'm like, "Give them something to do?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I am not doing my job." As in like showing what my she knew that I helped people, quote, occupy their time, I
Yeah.
guess, is you know what I mean?
Yep.
But like obviously I wasn't really showing what my skill set is, how I can help these clients to their best ability and like what that looks like. And it was like I remember instantly feeling defensive,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
also remember feeling like that's me. I totally blew that one. Like, I've been working with you for years and you still don't understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Like, it's taking a little bit of that responsibility. But I remember that one distinctly because I feel like we have so much to offer people who have dementia and play such an important role. And then just to be like, oh yeah, give them something to do. I'm just like, you are so missing the point. But also, I totally dropped the ball on this one. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, kicking yourself in the butt a little bit, but
But I think a lot of people, I'm sure everyone can relate to that. Like everyone's been in that situation where there's, one individual that, doesn't get it or says something that just makes you cringe or shake your head. But I think
yeah,
I do see a lot of therapists that go, that's just part of a greater problem. Like nobody understands. Everyone just groups everyone together. Like
yeah,
nobody understands. So they
good
don't,
point.
there's no proactive movement against that. Whereas I'm a grassroots kind of thinker. Like I'm the complete opposite. I'm like, there's one person. If I can, I said that when I started my podcast. I'm like, if I can provide some information that helps one person, that's enough. Like
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
can change one person's mind, that's enough. Like that's something, and then that person can, like, that information will flow on. No one gets information and then keeps it to themselves forever. That's not how humans work. We're social
mm,
beings. That goes for the information that we absorb. So if you can change one person, that person may change one person, and then that person may change one person. Whereas if you just throw your hands in the air and go, oh, it's all too hard, no one gets us, we'll just live in this obscure little occupational therapy world forever and complain about, no one understanding what we do or people wanting us to get them jobs, then like nothing's
right,
going to change. Like
right.
I'm a firm believer in that the biggest changes start with the smaller steps, and I think that people just need to feel comfortable with taking those small steps. And the best thing about it is those small steps take less effort than what we do every day anyway. Like
Yeah,
having that 10-second change in the language that we use is nothing compared to the communication and the work and the amazing stuff that we do every day. It's a small, tiny little change that I think of it kind of like vaccinations. Like individual vaccinations don't do anything, but when you have that sort of mass vaccination, it has a big impact. It's the same thing with this. Individually, yeah, it might not seem like you're doing much, but when everyone is doing that, like if every OT was able to use that language with someone once a day, that
mhm.
collectively is going to change consciousness in a massive fashion.
Yes, it's like, be the change. What's the quote? Be the change you wish to
Yeah,
see in
is
the
it
world or something.
Gandhi or
Oh,
someone?
yeah, yeah. But how about from a bigger standpoint, like because your healthcare system is obviously different than ours.
Hmm.
Like, is there a lot of how about like lobbying or talking to congressional, it's probably not governments and things like
Yep.
that, showing how our distinct value and how legislation impacts healthcare? Is that through like your national association, or how does that work?
Yeah, so a lot of that is done through our national association. They have, people with the expertise. Like this comes back to what we were saying at the start. Like because we're not essentially a very assertive, or we
Mm-hmm.
don't have that skill set to do that. Like our national
Mm-hmm.
association has people on staff that they're not OTs, but they have the experience in how to lobby and how to work in that political space. And then combining that with the OTs that are in the association, they're able to take on those issues on behalf of the profession.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a fantastic way to do it, because like if it was a bunch of OTs trying to do it, it just wouldn't work as well as someone who's like, that's their unique value. They know how the political system works and how best to make connections with, different ministers and that kind of thing, and how
Mm-hmm.
best to lobby in a political space, which isn't our wheelhouse. And I don't think it
Right.
should be. I don't think we need it to be. So yeah, a lot of that advocacy from the policy and the political point of view is done through the National Association, and obviously done in conjunction with members who have expertise in whatever area it is that they're actually
Right.
campaigning. So whether it's workplace rehab or disability or aged care, they'll bring in or have OTs that are willing to step up and consult with the person with the expertise in that sort of political realm.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same here. It's done because we have state associations and then we have national organization or
Mhm.
national American Occupational Therapy Association, and have lobbyists. But then we also have like a Capitol Hill Day where it's occupational therapists are given the opportunity to speak to Congress about pending legislation and laws that will affect us as a profession specifically in addition to lobbying. So that's
Okay.
kind of that's pretty cool. But
Yeah, that's cool.
is your national organization, are you mandated or are you required to be a part of it? And is that a
No.
commonplace?
So our
No.
registration and our national association are separate entities. So
Uh-huh. Ours
obviously we've
too.
mandated that we have to be registered.
Right.
Um, but there's no, like, it's not compulsory that you have to be a member of the national association.
Mhm.
Um, I encourage people to, because of the fact that, like, they do all of this legwork for us.
Yeah.
Um, they put on the conference. They, like, there's a whole heap of benefits. So
Right.
I'm sure it's
Right.
very similar to AOTA.
Yeah.
Um, and it's, yeah, some people say, oh, it's expensive, but, like, it's worth it if you want to see the profession keep going forward. Because at the moment, in Australia anyway, like, healthcare and the space where OTs fit is going through somewhat of a transition. So we've just got a new disability health model come in, which is more of a government insurance model as opposed to a like a welfare type model.
Mhm.
So the country's kind of transitioning, especially in that disability space, to a different health system. And I
Mm.
think that period, during that transition period, is when you really see the value of, like, the advocacy that's been put forward. Um, by the national association. I think those are the times when, like, you need to support them.
Yeah.
So even though it's not compulsory, I do encourage OTs to join up.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And it's a very much a hot topic over here as well because, like in the state of Colorado where I live, like I mean, we have such a low number of occupational therapists and occupational therapy assistants that are part of the state association, and then you have national, and I think it's a pretty low percentage as well. But I agree. I'm like, I'm not going to be the person to do the lobbying, and it's hard because people feel like, oh, I don't get anything, like what are they doing for us, like because we'll have laws passed or like rules and regulations that are not helpful to us, or there's certain struggles with reimbursement and payments and stuff like that, and like you feel like that's their job is to like lobby for us, and nothing's being done, nothing's changing, and it's really a tricky topic that's way bigger than this conversation. But
Yeah, yeah,
it's just like I do feel like we do have a professional, I personally feel like we have a professional obligation to, like, if we want to at least make that effort and have somebody lobbying for us, and being up to date on what all the legislation or all the things that are trying to be passed are going through. Like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not doing that. I have my own practice. You know what I mean? Like, I have my own things to kind of worry about. And
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I do
I wouldn't
encourage,
even know how.
yeah, I guess I can learn anything, but gosh, like it's not in my repertoire of my
Yeah,
skill
yeah.
set. So, but I do think, I mean, you need our state and national organizations to do that for us, to, advocate for us and show that we do have distinct value in the healthcare system. And, like, gosh, I want to, like, occupational therapy is such an amazing profession that does so many amazing things, and like I don't want it to go down the tube because we don't have somebody lobbying for us that doesn't understand what we are all about. So
And I think that's the risk of, if, like, it would be very easy for us to just go, well, the policies, we're in there, nothing's going to change. But it's little tiny changes at that policy level that change massive things when it comes to, like, how many OTs and who and what we can offer on the ground.
mhm.
Like, years ago, I remember it was a simple wording change in a mental health legislation here that essentially ruled out any sort of funding for OTs to practice privately in mental health.
Mm.
Like, that was a massive change, and it was just a wording
Yeah.
change. Like, it wasn't on that policy level, it was minuscule, but the effect that it had on the profession was enormous. And I remember being involved with the association at that point in time and them going into bat and getting it changed so that, OTs could still offer like viable services to people in private practice in mental health.
Wow.
So I think being complacent around those kinds of things too is again, it comes back to us not being an overly assertive profession. But we do have the power, like the associations, the way they're set up. Usually, they've got people on there that is their wheelhouse. So you support the association. If you don't want to get in there and do it yourself, which is completely
Totally.
understandable, like support your association and they'll go into bat
do
for
their
you, kind of
best.
thing. They've got the people that have the expertise.
Yeah. I hear you. I know it's so hard because we have a lot of things going on. Now we have like some big payment changes through our Medicare system, our government systems, and there's a lot of stress and turmoil, and legitimately, like, because you have private companies, sucking they're just like, some of them are just like money machines, and to the detriment of
Yep.
us as clinicians. And so everybody's just like, why can't this be done? But I do think it's bigger than just getting something changed. As we all know, like, if you know anything about government, it's like it's such a system that it's not as easy as I would like it to be. So I just keep trying to support the associations and hoping that they can um, lobby that way. And like, we have every right to our representatives as well. Like, we can do that
Yeah.
as well if we want our voice to be heard. But anyway, oh
I just think of it as more of I guess, a professional insurance kind of thing. Like, I don't know how your system
yeah,
over there works, but over here you can get private health insurance. You pay for it every
yeah,
year, whether you use it or not. But it's good to know that if you need it,
yeah,
it's there. And I think of like your association membership as that kind of like insurance for the profession. Like, you hope you don't need it, and yeah, you're paying for it every year. There's a lot of other benefits you get out of that as opposed to health insurance, but if you need it, so if something happens, like, it's
yeah.
there. Like, they'll listen to you, especially you've got a voice. Um, if something happens with the professional association, and they're there to support you should you need it. So yeah, I like to think of it as kind of like the backup plan, and to me, that's worth the
Mm-hmm.
money.
I know. Oh, occupational therapy. How I love thee.
Such a twisted web we weave.
So true. Too funny. Well, oh my gosh, I can't even believe it's already been almost an hour, Brock. It flew by.
It's because we just love the chit
It's the
chat.
chit chat.
That's
It's
how it
the chit
works.
chat.
It
Aw.
is. That's how we roll.
Two podcast hosts chatting together. See, it's like a explosion.
Always the longest conversations I have are with other people that do similar things to me, like podcasting.
Isn't that the truth?
Like, every episode I've recorded with like
Yeah.
another podcaster is
So
always
long.
like 2.5, 3 hours. Like, I'm like, wow.
Oh,
It's like
I love it.
too
And that's
explosive for.
part of the reason why, part of the reason why I love doing the podcast, because it's like you get to connect with so many other people and hear about their experiences, and you just kind of get on a roll,
Yeah, that's it.
It's too
It's
fun.
good fun.
Well, thanks again for joining me today.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you for
Of
asking.
course.
Hopefully, I sounded semi-intelligent this early in the morning, but if not, then too bad. I had fun
Exactly.
anyway.
Oh, thanks everyone for listening.
Do you feel like you're navigating the OT world without a map? Not feeling confident or competent in your day-to-day treatments and struggling to apply your knowledge clinically? Then be sure to check out the Seniors Flourish Learning Lab membership. It has all of the treatment ideas, patient handouts, clinical resources, community support, and mentorship you need to succeed. Join today at seniorsflourish.com/learninglab.